Hello. My name is Christian, and I'm here today to talk about the Miami Heat's 2021-2022 NBA regular season schedule. I'm here to predict all 82 games, nothing more and nothing less. The Miami Heat ended up being 40-32 in a shorter regular season, filled with many injuries and lineup changes. Bleacher Report put out this post on their predictions on the NBA regular season standings, and they had the Miami Heat at 48-34. Will that be too high, too low, or just right in my prediction? Let's find out. In our season opener, we start off by facing the NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks. Will we get our revenge on them for killing us in the playoffs? I believe we will. Miami will be 1-0. In our first road game, we'll go up against the Indiana Pacers. I hope TJ Warren is healthy so we can see Jimmy go at him in the same place they had their confrontation. I do believe Indiana will win this game though, making Miami 1-1. Next, we are back home against the Orlando Magic. Orlando beat us every time we faced them off for the first time in every damn season. But this season will be different. Miami wins. Next, we go back on the road as we face the powerhouse Brooklyn Nets. Some people may end up calling this an upset, but I do believe Miami will pull away with the W. We are back home and face the Charlotte Hornets in our first game on ESPN in the new season, and I believe Miami will continue the little hot streak by coming away with a W. Unfortunately, our little 3-game win streak ends here as we end up losing to Memphis yet again. It's a second night of a back-to-back, so that's a primary reason. One more road game as we go back home for 2 games. We are facing Luka and the Dallas Mavericks. We got swept in the season series last season by these Mavericks, and I believe this streak will continue. Miami drops 2 in a row. Back home against the Celtics, Miami ends their 2-game win streak as they beat the Boston Celtics for the 3rd consecutive win over them. Last game of this little 2-game homestand, the Jazz come into town. With Dwayne watching from the sidelines, Jimmy will dominate Utah just like he did last season in Miami. Our 10th game of the season, unfortunately, will be an L as we end up losing to the Denver Nuggets in Denver like we always do. Our record after 10 games is 6-4. Second game of this 5-game West Coast trip, we go up against LeBron and the Los Angeles Lakers. Some people may call me crazy, but the Miami Heat are going to win this game. Second night of a back-to-back, we're going up against the Los Angeles Clippers this time, and we're going to lose this one. We're going to have tired legs after beating LeBron the night before. We beat Utah and Miami a couple days ago. This time we're facing them in Utah, and I do believe we'll end up sweeping the season series against the Utah Jazz. Last game of the 5-game West Coast trip, we faced the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Miami is going to win this game to end the road trip with 2 straight wins. Back on Miami for 2 quick games as we go on another decently long road trip. We face Zion and the New Orleans Pelicans. We swept the Pelicans last year in the season series, but I do believe we'll drop this game. Next, we got the Washington Wizards. The Wizards actually beat us last year in Miami, but they aren't going to beat us this year. Miami wins. We start a 4-game road trip in the ultimate Eastern Conference rematch. We go up against the Washington Wizards again, and I do believe we'll beat them yet again. Next, we travel to Detroit to face Cade Cunningham and the Detroit Pistons. Miami will win their 3rd straight game. Next, we travel to Minnesota to face the Minnesota Timberwolves in a place where we always end up losing at. In the second night of a back-to-back, we'll end up losing to Minnesota yet again, ending our 3-game winning streak. Last game of the road trip, we travel to Chicago to face the Chicago Bulls. We're going to end up dropping our 2nd game in a row. We go back home to face the Denver Nuggets. We will get our revenge on Nikola Jokic as we go to 13-8 on the season. Next, we got the Cleveland Cavaliers, who we swept last year in the regular season series. We'll end up beating them yet again. Little 2-game road trip as we travel to Indiana yet again, and I predict that we'll lose to Indiana again, just like we did in the 2nd game of the regular season. One more road game as we go back home for 3 straight games. It's the playoff rematch against Milwaukee. I feel like they'll split the regular season series against us as Miami drops to 14-10 on the season. Next, we are back home for a little 3-game homestand as we face the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies beat us early on this regular season, and I do believe Miami will beat the Grizzlies in this game. Milwaukee versus Miami yet again, and I do think Miami will win this season series 2-1. Chicago travels to Miami. They just beat us early on this year as well, and I do believe they'll have our number. Miami loses as they go into a 4-game road trip. Miami travels to Cleveland, and this is an easy W. Let's just move on to this game. In our first meet against the Philadelphia 76ers, with Jimmy Butler returning to Philadelphia, Miami will end up beating Philly. Orlando is up next as we end up losing to the Magic in this game. We beat them in the 3rd game of the season, and I believe they'll get us back on a quote-unquote shocking upset. After 30 games, Miami is going to be 18-12. Some Heat fans may disagree, but hey, at least it's better than 13-17 after 30 games, just like how it was last season. Next, we travel to Detroit to face Cade and the Pistons again. We beat them already this year, and we'll beat them again as we end off this road trip. First game of our 4-game homestand, Indiana finally travels to Miami to face us, and unfortunately, Indiana will beat us again. Next up, Detroit will travel to Miami this time, and Miami will beat Detroit again. It feels like we've beaten Detroit 30 times this season. Orlando comes into town, and they'll catch this L just like they did in the 3rd game of the regular season. Washington travels back to Miami, and they'll end up losing yet again against us. Washington will not have our number. This will be our first game in this hellacious 7-game road trip as we travel to San Antonio. Miami will drop this game. I'm sorry. We go from San Antonio to Houston to face the Houston Rockets, and what I hope is Victor Oladipo's return game against them. Miami will beat the Houston Rockets. Next, we travel to Sacramento to face the Sacramento Kings. We swept the Kings last year in the regular season, but I have Miami dropping this game. Next up, we go up against the Golden State Warriors. We ended up blowing like a 13-point lead in the 4th quarter against them last season. I was hell depressed after the game, and I do believe Miami will beat the Warriors this year on the road. Next, we go up against the Portland Trail Blazers. Miami will win their 2nd straight road game as their record goes to 25-15 after 40 games. First meeting of the year against the Phoenix Suns, they absolutely destroyed us last season, and they'll start off this season by destroying us again. In the last road game of the 7-game road trip, we travel to Atlanta and we will beat the Hawks to cap off the road trip. Next game, the Hawks travel to Miami this time, and they'll get their revenge in this game. Miami loses. Philadelphia travels to Miami, and they'll beat us after we beat them in Philly earlier this season as we lose another 2nd game off of a back-to-back. Toronto flies from Canada to Miami as the Raptors face the Heat, and Miami will end their little 2-game losing streak as they win this game. Portland travels to Miami this time after we beat them a couple of games ago in that road trip. I do believe we'll beat them and sweep them in this regular season series. We travel back to Atlanta. We split our back-to-back games against them earlier this season. Miami will end up winning this game. As we go home for 4 straight games, LeBron and the Lakers come to town, and I think they'll tie this series up 1-1. Miami will lose. Next, we got the New York Knicks versus the Miami Heat. We swept them last year in the regular season series, and I believe the winning will continue against the Knicks as Miami wins the 30th game of the season. Next, we got the Clippers again. We did lose to them in LA without Kawhi earlier this season, and I think we'll lose to the Clippers again tonight. Second game of a back-to-back, and this being our last game of the homestand, we will beat the Toronto Raptors again as we go for another long road trip, this being 5 games. First, we travel to Boston to face the Celtics. We beat them in Miami earlier this year, and I think we'll end up losing to the Celtics in this game. Next, we got the Kyle Lowry game as we travel to Toronto. Miami will end up beating Toronto again this season. Next, we go up against the Charlotte Hornets. We beat Charlotte earlier this year, and we'll lose to them in this game. Next, we got the almighty Washington Wizards, who will lose yet again to the Miami Heat. In the last game of the road trip, we traveled to New Orleans as we lose to the Pelicans again this season as we get swept in the season series. We are back home for 2 games as we start off against the Brooklyn Nets. I hope the Nets are healthy so we can see Miami beat them again this season, and I do believe that will happen. Next, we go up against Dallas, and I think we'll beat Dallas after losing to them earlier in the season. We end up traveling to Charlotte to face the Hornets, and I think Miami will win their 4th straight game as they head into the All-Star break 36-23. First game after the All-Star break, we travel to New York to face the Knicks, and I think the Knicks will finally beat the Miami Heat in this one. We are back in Miami for 2 games as we face the San Antonio Spurs. Miami will win this one in another second night of a back-to-back. Chicago travels back to Miami, and I think Miami will finally beat the Bulls in this meeting. on the road for 2 back-to-back games as we face 2 beastly teams in the East, starting with Milwaukee, and Miami will drop this game. Next we travel to Brooklyn as we face the Nets, and Miami will lose this one as well, unfortunately. We travel back to Miami for our first of 7 games at home as Philadelphia travels to town, and Miami will end up beating them yet again. Second meeting between the Rockets and the Miami Heat, I think Miami will end up sweeping the regular season series just like they did last season. The Western Conference champion Phoenix Suns travel to Miami, in which they'll lose as Miami ties the season series. Next we go up against Cleveland, and come on now, we're winning this game easy. Another second night of a back-to-back against the Timberwolves, and I think we'll finally beat Minnesota in this game. Next game is against the Detroit Pistons, and unfortunately, we'll end up dropping the game, ending our 5-game win streak. Oklahoma City travels to Miami this time, and they'll end up getting swept in the regular season series. Miami's on a hot streak at the end of their homestand. Miami travels to Philadelphia, where they won earlier this season, and Miami will end up beating Philly yet again. Back at home for 4 straight home games, Golden State will tie the regular season series as Miami drops this one. Next we got the Knicks, and Miami will in fact beat the New York Knicks again this year as they go to 46-28. Second night of a back-to-back, Brooklyn comes into town, and Miami will drop this game to the powerhouse Brooklyn Nets. Last game of the homestand, we have the Sacramento Kings, and I think Miami will sweep the season series just like they did last season. First of this 3-game road trip, we travel to Boston to face the Boston Celtics, and we'll end up dropping 2 games in a row against the Celtics in this regular season. Next we travel to cold Chicago, and Miami will beat Chicago yet again, tying the season series at 2 apiece. Next we travel back to Toronto for another game against the Toronto Raptors, and this will be yet another victory for the Miami Heat against them. Back home for our last 2 road games of the regular season, and Charlotte comes into town. Miami will end up beating Charlotte yet again. Miami will be at 50 wins. The Atlanta Hawks travel to Miami this game, and I do believe Miami will win their 5th straight game as they beat the Atlanta Hawks. Last game of the season against the Orlando Magic. This game probably won't mean anything for us, so I feel like we'll rest our starters for this one, and the Orlando Magic will end up beating us. Miami will end the regular season at 51-31 in my prediction. Our home record will be 31-10, and our road record will be 20-21. That's it for this video. Will I get the prediction right? We'll see if the prediction holds up when the calendar is in the middle of April. Thank you guys for watching. I'm out.